Welcome. This is Deep to Deep. I'm Laura Alexander, and today I'm joined by mentor, podcast host, speaker, and coach Jeff Murray. Jeff is someone whose presence and work I have come to deeply appreciate, his online presence. And what drew me to Jeff wasn't just his story as a former athlete or mentor, it was his presence, direct, very grounded, calm, not performative, not wearing a social mask. And that feels very rare and refreshing in today's world. So, this conversation may be a winding road. There may be some unexpected turns. I do wish we had all day because there's so much I'd like to explore. So, we'll just see where it goes. Let's go deep, deep to deep. I'm very grateful that you're here.
Thank you for the intro and the kind words first and foremost. I'm just grateful to be speaking with you today and to hopefully, you know, share some of my experience, whether people perceive it as wisdom or not, is their interpretation, and that's totally fine. But I just hopefully bring some value and just allow people to maybe see things from a different lens.
Um, I listened to your conversation on the space in between with Deneen Sig, and when you spoke about one of the four E's, which was expelling identity, and that's something that I have been working with for a long time, like seeing the construct, that everything is a construct, that the personalities are a construct, and the fact that a green light means go and a red light means stop. It's all stuff that the human mind has made up. And
Mhm.
so thanks for bringing that. And I'd like to hear a little bit about how you came to these understandings because you started out as a sports guy. Were you a typical jock, or how long have you been on this spiritual path?
I guess when we're younger, I think we're all kind of stereotypical jocks in that kind of context. But I was raised by a single mother, and I think that did set me apart in a different way, and in a lot of ways, in the sense that I understood things from a more intuitive level, necessarily than because there's the thing about women's intuition, and I believe I subconsciously picked up on more things than most of my peers did. It just at that time because I was being raised by a woman. Yeah, I saw my father on weekends and he would come to sporting events and stuff, but which I'm super grateful for. But yeah, I was still always on that keep doing action. It's always got to do more, do more, do more, and that led into the working world. It led into just always never being satisfied, and it wasn't until after going through a couple divorces and just sabotaging a career that I had that was, at the time was a pretty decent living for where I was at in my life, and just sabotaging because I hated it and hated my life, and getting to a point where I didn't even care if I lived anymore. And this is 2014 that
Mhm.
I started on this. It started out as a mindset path, which in our social world, everything seems to be so heavy mindset. Everything, we see all of these people, which a lot of them I really do like and I really enjoy. You, some of my favorite people like to watch is like David Goggins and Jocko Willink because their intensity is so it's so polarizing and compelling that you can't help but not watch what they're talking about. But the problem is that we don't know what their background was like. And
Mhm.
we see this overpower, overcome, stay hard mentality, which is absolutely a thing, and we should all embrace that. But when you don't understand why you keep circling back through the same, you could call it a karmic loop or whatever you want to call it, of why does the same thing keep happening to me over and over and over again? Why do I keep sabotaging this? Why do I keep attracting the same person? Why do I keep having the same issues with the same types of people in different jobs, or whatever the case may be? The examples are endless. Then mindset really doesn't hold a lot of weight because
Mm.
you're constantly in fight or flight mode. Your nervous system is totally in shock all the
For
time
sure.
and is constantly moving. So it wasn't until, and I was doing the mindset work and I thought that was everything. And I'm like, yeah, I would challenge my mindset with almost anyone at when I turned 40. And then, a series of events happened, and I started getting into coaching and around COVID. And then it was all just, all the lessons were there before. I just refused to see them. And I just kept, it's the same adage of uh, doing something over and over again, expecting in the same way, expecting a different results, the definition of insanity. And you're thinking you're changing things, but you're making micro movements because you're still attached to a certain thing. And I went through a really rough breakup at the age of just turned 44 at that time. And I had my one and only anxiety attack. And I, and in my mind, I'm hyperventilating because I'm like sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? I just lost someone that I thought that could possibly have children with or whatever. And that was the thoughts going through my head. But as I'm hyperventilating, I now joke and say it was my first breathwork session. Essentially what it is, when you're having an anxiety attack, it's that hyperventilating is an intense rhythmic breathing that some holotropic style breathing is like. And in that moment of that grieving of what now I see was abandonment, I had this remembrance of my father leaving at 5 and me chasing him down the road. And I was like, holy shit, what is that about?
Yeah.
And I mean, it snapped me out of my hyperventilating, but I immediately started thinking, like, why is that memory, which I had known before, but it came flooding back in that moment. Like, why is that coming up? So I like buried myself for like 2 weeks just to try to deep dive, because I'm the type that I've got to know the answers. I got to know everything. And all of a sudden I saw there was this direct connection with abandonment. And that's when I saw that. And I'm like, the first time I experienced abandonment was that day, or my first remembrance of it. And now I'm feeling those same emotions in the same situations of feeling abandoned from someone that I cared about and loved. So that's when the inner work started, which was almost 4.5 years ago. So, and it's that spirituality has just evolved. Very long-winded answer to your question, but that's the basically progress and process that I've gone through, and then it continues to evolve in different ways. But that's when it all kind of started.
Not a long wind. It was a great answer. So when you're working with a client, what tools do you offer them when they are going through a cycle of abandonment and they're feeling abandoned?
I mean, typically what I like to do, because everybody's different, but the same process always kind of applies in the sense that I really just try to, and I'm not a therapist, so, and I'm not, I'm not a licensed therapist, so but I do try my best to help guide them through a process of understanding. I've gone through like trauma informed work with Bessel van Koch, who's the author of The Body Keeps the Score. So I've gone through a 7-month course of that to be a little bit more trauma informed, but I just go through some questions of just guiding them in just like can you remember the first time you experienced that? Can you remember what that felt like? Do you remember how old you were? Do you remember the people that were around? Do you remember the scenario? Like, what was happening? How did you feel? And when they start to realize that, obviously there's going to be emotions there and not understanding the whole context, but that's helping them recognize at least, or get close to, the first time that they really remembered experiencing that particular feeling of abandonment or emotion. And in that, I just try to help them, hold their inner child and say it's okay, and that you're not that child anymore, and this is a different situation, and you don't have to be there anymore. You don't have to respond the same way. It wasn't personal then, and it's not personal now, and you can just try to help move through it. And just, I mean, that's kind of a quick way of doing it. It takes typically much longer, but that's just kind of the direction and path I try to lead people down to try to help them move through that. And in general, and the whole purpose is to, usually that abandonment, that first time we feel abandoned, it's not even really the abandonment of the person leaving us. it's actually the first time that we developed the survival skill to abandon being our true self.
Mm.
And
And there's
that's
always a cost to that, always.
absolutely. And as kids, it makes sense, right? Because all we're trying to do is feel loved and accepted by
Mhm.
our parents. And in that, that's when parent pleasing starts. And then from parent pleasing, it turns into people pleasing. And then from people pleasing, it turns into partner pleasing. And it just keeps evolving. And it serves us as kids because it helps us feel safe in a moment. Because I tell people too that the first um, essence of life and what we're born into is love. But the most important thing that ever is lost isn't love, it's safety, because safety is the core essence of what makes all of us feel at home within our own body. Because as soon as that safety is compromised, we're pulled away from love, and we do whatever we can, which then means that we abandon who we actually are to feel that sense of love. And it's not like I had a bad childhood, honestly. I mean, I was definitely raised poor, and in a lot of ways, and by context of my friends, but I didn't have a bad childhood compared to a lot of people. But and I've talked and gone through all this stuff with my parents, and I have an amazing relationship with both of them. But it's I told them, I said, abandonment for a child could be as simple as you're supposed to pick them up from school, and all of a sudden you're 2 hours late one day.
Mhm.
And it starts there. And if it's not addressed in a proper way, that kid develops that survival tactic in that moment to never feel like their safety has been compromised.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
There's gosh, there's so much to unpack about that feeling of abandonment and security. Um, as someone who has wrestled with PTSD and sort of walked through that trail,
Hmm.
um, it is it's a tricky slope sometimes to navigate. Uh, the brain tells you everything's fine, you're fine. There's nothing horrible happening here, but the nervous system can get triggered, uh, and and then the physical experience of having that kind of a PTSD episode, of that flight or fight taking in, uh, it can take a while to bring that back, and which is where I think the breath comes in. The breath is
Hmm.
my best friend. During the
Hmm.
pandemic, I'll say I was having a lot of panic, and I would find myself, I'd put my hand on my heart and just say, breathe, you're okay. Everything's fine. You're okay. Breathe. But I had to literally coach myself and tell myself to take a breath, because I realized I was holding my breath. And that's another thing that drew me to talking with you and your work, is that holotropic, the breathing techniques.
Hmm.
And I like the Wim Hof method as well.
Hmm.
I've had some experiences doing breath work that felt like a completely different person after the breath work session. Did
Hmm.
you discover this like in a workshop setting, or how did you come to doing breath work?
Yeah, it was so my first guided one was 4 years ago, just over, or actually it was 4 years ago this week. Actually, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, that was my first guided one, and it was at a men's retreat. It was called the 48-hour reset. And it was about 50 men, and it was held by a group that is no longer together, but they were called the Empowered Brotherhood. But the three main men that kind of created the whole container. There's a lot of other great people, two of which are still in Austin, one's now in San Diego. But that was the first time I did a guided breathwork session, and that was yeah, same thing. And that's the thing, is that breathing essentially in that rhythmic pace, and for people that are listening and that haven't done it before, what it does is it starts to induce us almost into the same way that we typically breathe not to the same extent, but similar in fashion to when we go to sleep and we start to dream, and what and when we fall asleep and we're in that rhythmic breathing, we're still in that lucid state, obviously, because although I have seen people fall asleep when they're doing it, I'm like, I don't know how that's possible, but
Mhm.
especially if you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it starts, what it does in that rhythmic pattern is it triggers something, which is obviously the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is what then releases our natural DMT. I know DMT can be taken in plant medicine form slash toad venom type of situation, but it releases DMT naturally, which causes us to dream. And same thing as what we do when we sleep, but now we're still in an awake state. So we have those hallucinogenic effects of seeing visions. And breath work, I believe, if people are not ready for plant medicine or anything along those lines, or that's not their calling, breath work is by far and away one of the most transformative things I've ever done, and I still continue to do. And I believe in it wholeheartedly because it can truly bring us back to remembrance. And I think the key of it all is because we're basically souls living in a somatic experience, and we just have to get back to that remembrance. And that's really what breath work does, is you set that clear intention and you go in and you start to see specific visions. But the breath, I also believe, is the divine that's in us.
Mhm.
I'm more of a spiritual person than I am religious, but in the sense that I believe that we're not separated from God. I believe that we are the I am, and there's, I think, a lot of proof in that, because if we weren't the I am as well, we wouldn't be given the gift to be able to say I am and say whatever follows that. I
Mhm.
believe there's a lot of context with that, but I also believe breath is actually the context of just of God and the divinity in us. And if you really break down, like if you look at the word Holy Spirit, which is one of the most, and I love etymology and I love breaking words down and seeing where the root came from. The word holy means to be whole, and the word spirit means to breathe.
Mm.
So whole breathing or whole breath is essentially the gift that's been given to us. It's the very thing that keeps us alive, but it's the very thing that also brings us back to life, to remembering who we were or who
Mhm.
we are. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you brought up DMT, I remembered someone saying that when we die, our brain releases DMT, and that
Mhm.
is part of the when people are having these wow, like Steve Jobs, the last words he said when he was leaving his life was, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." And I wondered if that was part of it, was that release of the DMT.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of, and again, this is only my experience and my thoughts and words, and just like I said, experience of life, that when I speak from my lens, I don't speak for anybody else but myself. But yeah, there's a lot of the talks of, well, I've had a talk with one of my good friends who's Christian, and uh he's like, well, there's people in hospice that say they see the light, and then there's also people that see like darkness. Like, how do you explain that? And I said, well, it's DMT releasing in the brain, and it's a hallucinogenic effect, and really what's coming up for them is their experience of life. If they've led a life, or if they've reached the point of leading a life, again, this is my belief system. I'm not a doctor, or I don't have a doctorate in anything, but if our experience of life has been led, or we've gotten to the point of leading from an integral, authentic space, we're going to go and be okay with that. We're not fearing death. We're okay with it. And we're going to see a light essence. If we've done wrong by others most of our life and we've continuously inflicted pain on others, we're most likely going to see what people will call as demons or hell or darkness. And it doesn't mean we're ascending or descending to that place. It just means that the DMT that's being released is allowing you, you're no longer able to course correct your life at this point. That's the last vision you're going to see.
Mm.
And that's where you're going, you know?
It's one of the great mysteries. And I do think there's more to it. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that we can hypothesize about, but um, in addition to the physiology of like the DMT release at the end of one's life, I do also have a sense that if we are one with everything that is the macrocosm, if we are like one microcosmic expression of the macrocosm that is everything, my sense is that as we get closer to leaving this 3D realm, that we would be astonished at what we're starting to tap into, which is so much bigger than the body. And
Mhm.
it's unfortunately it's one of those things that no one can really like tell us about. It's like
Right.
once we go through it, it's like, oh, it's a great mystery there.
Mhm.
I want to ask you a little bit about just your thoughts on this is something that came up for me just this morning. Um, I mean, I really, it's such a tricky time that we're living in. But this morning I learned about the shooting of a 37-year-old woman, Renee Nicole Good. And it's going to be a controversial topic because there are
Mhm.
some who say she was being a terrorist. But the video that I saw was that she was trying to escape from ICE officials, and she was just shot. It could have been avoided. And I see stories like this, and my nervous system gets really squirrely. Um, I forget to breathe, the
Mhm.
heart starts to pound, and I get concerned about the world that we live in. And I know from a spiritual perspective, we talk about, be in the world, but not of the world.
Mhm.
And I think for women, especially women on our own, I mean, for all of us, actually, we need to be strong. But because I started studying the feminine and masculine, archetypes back 20 years ago, actually, it's probably been, yeah, 20 years ago, um, the work of David Data and
Mhm.
feminine
Yeah.
surrender versus masculine agency. And, as a woman on my own, and I know there are a lot of us, and even women in relationships, it's like we have this feeling that we need to be strong, vigilant, internally stoic for self-preservation.
Mhm.
Over time, that armor that keeps us functioning, I feel like that can diminish our feminine flow and make us more masculine. And when I was younger, I would see women and I would think, why is she so hardened? Why is she not more feminine? And I realize now that she was dealing with a lot of responsibility and
Yeah.
having to engage in her masculine in a way that I had not yet had to do. Um, And it feels like this sort of trap. I don't know. I'm at a loss when it comes to how to be a fully feminine woman, also hold down a full-time job while creating businesses and slaying dragons. I don't know how to be that playful feminine essence that I was even at 30. Like there's
Right.
so much. Um, I feel like I'm personally at a crossroads, and I wasn't going to make any of this about me. But I think there are
No.
other women who can relate to this probably too.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is why men are attracted to younger women often because it's just that they haven't gone through so much stuff. They haven't walked through decades of the same kind of trials. I mean, I had been through a lot by the time I was, 20, but pile on a couple more decades and it has a way of changing a person. And
Mhm.
this has been coming up a lot for me lately because it does feel like crossroads time, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not looking for an answer. Probably there isn't one to that, but I'm curious about that. Do men have a sense of compassion for those of us women who are like in our midlife, who've just been slogging through the jungle with a machete on our own, trying to carve out a life here, yet we're still expected to be these feminine goddesses, and I'm kind of tired. And I think that that's where the craving for the masculine comes into play. And I wonder how we older women are perceived. Do you guys take into account like what we've been through to make us how we are?
But, and there's obviously a lot of depth to it, and I can only speak from, like the lens that I come from and how I see in the work that I've done. But to answer your question, a healthy man can, yes, absolutely. A healthy man who is grounded in their masculinity can and does have compassion for a woman that's been through life and has had to balance everything. We see a lot more single mothers out there today, and just we said just a lot more, having to do and hold all of the hats, and it is a difficult balance. And in that, especially with the way our society is today, women as well as men, we're both having our own difficulties of understanding and navigating who we are. And there's, a lot of people are like, well, you just need to go back to traditional values. Okay, that's easier said than done in a world that's pulling us in the opposite direction. It's pulling us in a direction that, in but we're also evolving. We're not, to sit there and say everything needs to go back to the way it was is kind of like saying, well, the education system is the right way to teach kids, which we all know that is not, hopefully know that that's not the right way to teach people. That was all a thing that was done by Rockefellers to kind of create more worker bees than people that actually free think. And
Mm.
but in essence, it's the same thing that's happening with, and education system needs to evolve. We need to evolve in relationships. When all this really kind of started in the 70s, with women's liberation, things were starting to evolve. It was seen in a way, it's the problem is that women had to start working because we're actually starting to see inflation a lot more back then. And obviously now it's just crazy, but it's evolved to where it is really hard in a lot of ways, depending on where you live, to raise a family on one income. And when it comes to women, and then of course, because of that, women had to start working. And when
Well, and
women started
also,
working,
if, to interrupt for just a moment,
yeah,
also women needed to feel a sense of their own safety and autonomy, if especially in a relationship with a man that they couldn't fully trust.
right.
And to be dependent on another person, that is like the ultimate vulnerability, to not have any of your own. I mean, women couldn't even get credit cards on their own name until the 70s. Not that I think credit cards are a great idea, but um,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. 100%. And it is true because I mean, infidelity has been going on long, centuries and centuries. It's always been going on, but yet, yeah, women have developed a sense of agency to where they don't have to necessarily feel like they're all of a sudden, like how my mom was, all of a sudden divorced, without a college education because she just thought she was going to be a mother and that was pretty much it. And all of a sudden she's having to raise two boys on her own pretty much and just do her thing. And it's so it's it's such a weird energetic pull. So now that women have to work, men are were used to, and a lot of men were raised on the fact that you bring home, you're the breadwinner, you bring home the bacon, and your wife is home cooking and she's taking care of the kids, and you come home and then, just the typical MO of what we thought life was supposed to be, but that's not the case. And as women started to evolve and adapt into this person that is self-sustaining, men's didn't adjust. And a lot of times we're still struggling to adjust that, okay, well, she's doing her thing, uh, and this is where it's at right now. And then how do I adjust to that? She's not home cooking. So now we have to split duties. And there's a lot of dynamic. And in a perfect world, the man would in a perfect scenario, the man makes money, has a sense of purpose, a mission, he does well for himself. And in that, she has the freedom to create, which is what women do, right? I mean, they're the ones that actually birth children. They are the creators, the essence of life. And in a perfect world, I think women, no matter what they've been through, their purpose in life is to create from a loving, nurturing space.
Hmm.
I think that that's a lot of where it is, but yet a lot of what's happening is you see a lot of women, like you said, creating businesses, being founders, CEOs of businesses. And in that same context, can that work where a woman is the breadwinner and the man maybe stays at home? It can, for sure. There still needs to be healthy feminine masculine dynamics. And I think the difficulty, to kind of get back to what you were asking, is the compassion. Is a healthy masculine man will have compassion for a woman that's been through a lot, that's having to hold all the hats. And yet at the same time, the expectation is, for where a man has to be careful, is that to not try to become the hero. And that, I know I speak from experience, because that was my MO. Was I was always trying to be the hero.
Mm.
And you can't save anyone. That's not your responsibility. You can be the king and she can be the queen, but you're not trying to save her. She is her own sovereign being, and so are you. And you're just there as a provider, as a loving, caring, grounded, and also, protective husband. And the woman is there as the queen, and she is the one that is the nurturer, the carer, the one that kind of brings some reason into a man who might be, a little bit quick to make a decision, brings a little bit of reason into a situation. Like, the balance comes in. And with the world what we're in today, with women having to do working, they're working a job, or they're, have a high position job, or they're a founder of their own company, or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
there needs to be a switch that kind of, and it's hard. And I know it's hard because I've talked to a lot of people about this, and a lot of women about this. It's hard to just, because you got to wear kind of a masculine hat a little bit when you're in that business, because it's the act of doing and dictating and directing, or and doing all the types of work that a typical situation that requires masculine energy, where somehow there needs to be found a the balance in the work of, how do I bring in my feminine nature to this work, to where I can actually allow it to flow, to nurture it, to do it so from a creative space, and to not have to feel like there's so much control.
Mm.
And then from there, to be able to cut that energy off from work, to be, if you are in a relationship or seeking a relationship, to allow yourself to surrender to a man who's wanting to be masculine, because that's where a lot of the dynamic of struggle is that men see a woman that's maybe a healthy masculine man sees a woman that's in her masculine, they immediately it kind of gets drawn away, because
Mm.
it's like, oh well, she's got it all figured out and she doesn't need someone, so I'm going to
No, she
find someone
doesn't.
who's right.
She
Well,
doesn't.
exactly. Yeah,
Can
but
I
they
tell you?
almost someone yeah, sometimes they don't want to try, so that it becomes this weird construct of even trying to evolve together.
Yes. I want to tell you what came up while you were sharing. There were a couple of things. One was the power that the masculine presence has to actually help shift a woman into that space of her feminine.
Mhm.
They have so much to do with that, and it can look like. I had some friends in Charlotte, North Carolina. They owned a business that was pretty demanding. And when you walked into their home, in their living room, they had a massage table. And every
Mm.
single day at the end of work, they would each take a turn on the massage table and give each other even just 10 minutes of massage as a ritual that would
Mm.
say, okay, we're done. We're done slaying the dragons for the day. And now we're going to walk through this portal into connection. And then I think the physicality of,
Yeah.
even when I go to the gym, I feel more relaxed and more in tune with that kind of surrendered state.
Yeah. I totally get that. Movement is medicine, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But in that same context, I'm not, I may be familiar with the person, but yeah, I think that's honestly brilliant because it's an immediate, even if it's like you said, 10 minutes for one getting a massage, 10 minutes for the other getting a massage, 20 minutes, but immediately, whether the woman's working and the man's working, or whatever the case may be, the man's just working, maybe the woman's working, doesn't matter the dynamic. What it does is immediately sets and separates and creates a pattern interrupt of the day and says, now we're in relationship mode. Now
Mm-hmm.
we're back here. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I do think that it is funny because you see there's a, social media can be, such a black hole. But I see a lot of people in the spiritual space and conscious space, and you get a lot of that here in Austin. It's almost too much over the top to some extent, but you see so many people that say a healthy man will bring out the feminine in a woman, but then you see a lot of people say that a healthy feminine will actually help a man bring out more of his masculine. So it's like, okay, well, which is it, or is it both? And I don't think it's this or that. I think it's this and that. And
Mm-hmm.
I in it basically what it comes down to is both need to continue to work on themselves first so that they can show up better for their partner.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny. I hadn't intended to do a relationship show with you. I was going to talk about your work with athletes and health and healing, but I guess this is something that's been coming up for me. So I appreciate your willingness to go down this path and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, everything in life, honest, I was having this talk with a buddy of mine not too long ago. My buddy and I, we meet up usually try to meet up once a month at this Thai restaurant here in Austin, and we just talk about all the things. But we really, one of the things we mentioned one of the last times we met up was that everything in life is relationships. It's everything is relationships. So having talks about it, it's like, it's what's our relationship with this person, what's our relationship with this food, what's our relationship with our job, what's our relationship with, it could
Ourself.
be our computer, our cell phone, ourself. Yeah, I mean, it's, it could be our relationship to working out. Like, it's anything, and it goes into the context of what's an addiction, what's a healthy, is there even a healthy addiction? I don't think there is a healthy addiction.
Not
Um,
even
you know,
working out or eating clean.
no, not even more, because that becomes an obsession, and then you become an alternate version of yourself because you're hard to even be around because you're so obsessed about doing the thing.
Hmm.
And it's having, because I mean, I went through that myself with just the relationship aspect of being a very physically active person. And the first time I experienced it was about 3 years ago, where I injured my back and I could barely even do anything for about a month. I could walk, but there was a lot of pain, and I had just gotten done with 75 hard, and I was like on day 90, and just, in my mind, you're stuck in the mind, but you're like, I'm thriving, I'm doing great, this is awesome. And it was the second or third time that I had done it, but it was still like, in my mind, I'm like doing 2 workouts a day, and now all of a sudden I can't work out. And I started, and working with the athletes, part of my thing is stop identifying as the athlete. And that's one of the things that's holding you back. You're so much more than just an athlete. Well, I was identifying as someone who's physically active, and then when I couldn't work out because it was taken away from me because I hurt my back, I started to feel this. It's situational depression, but you start feeling this energetic heaviness of like, man, I'm really down on myself right now.
Yeah.
And I said to myself in that moment, I caught myself, I'm like, holy shit, this is the very thing that I tried to coach people on. And yet now I'm being faced with a whole nother version of it. And so I had to sit with it. And I sat with myself and said, would I be okay if I was never able to work out ever again? And I had to come with peace, and I have a process that I go through where I just kind of see the situation and the problem, and I see it come to me, and I process it through, and then I allow it to leave in its own way. And I'm like, yeah, now I am. Then I wasn't, but I would be okay if I was not able to ever work out again. But we identify our identity and the basically expelling the identity, like we talked about earlier, was that's part of it as well. Everything is an identity, and everything's in a relationship because of that, from that identity.
Yeah. Well, the actual chemicals that happen in the body too that aren't there when you can't work out. I was very fit and in shape, and then 3 years ago I got into a desk job, and I went from being a person who was always moving to a person who was sitting down for eight,
Mhm.
9 hours at a time, and it took a real toll. And then I got back into working out here in Austin. I was going to F45. I don't know if you've tried their workouts, but I was starting to feel
Yeah.
stronger, and then I hurt my knee. And I've been out for a couple of months, and I just started going back to the gym. And I just feel like there's an actual, like, I didn't feel good the last couple of months not being able to work out. So
Mhm.
it's not just about identifying as that, but the chemicals that we get from working out. But then I did find you can even sit like in a hot sauna and get a
Yeah.
similar endorphin release.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that I believe everything, it's a gift and also a test. I think they start out as tests, and then once we start to see the answer in the test, it becomes a gift. And everything like that happens for a reason. I don't believe that it's just situational, or I believe it's, just a consequence or whatever, but it's really, it all happens, like, and especially the parts of our body that we do injure. I honestly believe in, especially in the context of the body keeps the score, and where we store energy in our body, based off of traumatic experiences, certain parts of our body, depending on left or the right, left being the feminine, right being the masculine, is always, those parts of our body get injured because we're storing trauma and stress in that part of the body. And I find it very interesting, because it's always about our ability to adapt. And I think that's one of the most key human just skills that we need to cultivate, is adaptability, because it's not lack of resources, it's lack of resourcefulness. Whereas, like you said, like, oh, it's the chemicals. Yeah, that's true. Like endorphins spike, so many good, all the, I guess you call them, like, you can call them the daily dose chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, is they spike in moments of movement, but you can still do that, through things like sauna, where you're just stationary, um, and other forms of things, but mindfulness. And that's where, if you look at someone like Joe Dispenza, who got into an accident, and they didn't know if he'd ever be able to walk again, and I know a lot of people think it's woo woo, but I mean, he literally, just through his mind, he was a chiropractor, and just started piecing together, like, essentially the vertebrae to heal the spine back, and
Mm.
visualizing, and through mindfulness and through meditation. And that's the thing, is that we're so caught in this external construct of, this is what's going to give me this, but yet we've been given everything that we need within our own body. We're just and I think sometimes those moments where we're pushed to be still is our body saying, it's time for you to go in and figure out the answer, and be more resourceful with what the God given gifts you've been given, instead of just always doing it from the external.
The work that you're doing, uh, the power of presence.
Mhm.
If there's a vision that you have for that work and where you'd like to see it go, would you like to share that vision so that we can see it with you, know it with you, and help affirm it for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I haven't had anybody actually ask me that question, but the vision for it, and it's evolved since I've gotten into the personal development work, but and it can continue to evolve to something else. But where this is, and where I've come to this power of presence, and just extreme presence, is just helping people understand, in a world full of distractions and chaos, is to get them back to connecting more with others and with themselves, more importantly. everything good that's ever come from in my life has been when I'm fully present in the moment. Minimize the distractions to just be here, all here right now, and doing what's right with what's right in front of me. And my vision for this is to, as I'm still like, taking on some client. I'm not really promoting it at this point, as like, because I'm really trying to focus more on writing a book about this, and also public speaking. And because I got into coaching, honestly, because I wanted to be a public speaker, but people told me I couldn't without having some sort of platform. So I'm like, well, okay, whatever. So I got into coaching, which I love, serving people in that way and seeing the transformation. But I've always wanted to be, I never wanted to be someone's guru. I just wanted to plant a lot of seeds. And I feel like if I can plant seeds to an audience of, a couple hundred to a couple thousand people, or more, and 5% of those people actually water that seed, I think that so much transformation can happen from that. And that's kind of where, because it's not up to me to water the seed, it's up to them. I can only plant the seed, and from there it can take sprout and become a sapling, and into an actual bush or a tree, or the tree of life, because I believe we're all nature. I believe we are trees in essence, and or plants, if you will. But if I were to really I just want to keep planting seeds for humanity to help get us back to presence. Because honestly, in my vision and my view and my experience of life and the way the world's going, we need presence more than ever. I feel presence is the most powerful thing. It truly is the I am. If you really think about, like, what does God represent? He represents love, and love is presence. And where do we find the most presence in life? It's in simplifying. It's in the most simplistic things of life. And that's, I always try to get people to visualize, like, the first early moment as being a child, and to visualize that experience of when seeing the world in awe and wonder, and like looking around was just such like wonder, and just mesmerized by the beauty and the colors, and a new flower, or maybe it's a butterfly, or maybe it's the first time you see a baseball game, whatever it is. But get back to that, because a child is the closest thing to presence, because they're innocent, and innocence is presence. And to even further that fact, I mean, think about any of us. A majority of people probably have some form of a pet. You think, if you have a dog, what is the essence of a dog? They're so focused on the present. They're not focused on the past. They're not focused on the future. They're just there with their human. They're outside. Whatever it is that's in that moment, they're there. And they're the most present. Like, we can learn so much from them. We can learn so much from kids if we just allow ourselves to separate from our ego and just get back into that sense of innocence and awe and wonder, and just being like, yeah, this is what it's all about. And it's not saying we have to run around acting like children, but it's about invoking that spirit of the child again, and invoking
Staying
that,
curious.
and staying curious. I think curiosity is some of the, because that's, as if we're not curious, then we're judgmental, and that means we're judgmental on ourselves, and then we start. And as soon as we get judgmental, judgment is all involved with the past and the future. It has nothing to do with the present. And when we're focused on the present, everything that takes us away, the past is all about depression, the future is all about anxiety, and those two things always keep pulling us away. And as soon as we can get into the present moment, I tell people to live a 10-80-10 life. That's one of the things I talk about in my speeches, and that's to live a 10-80-10 life. Everybody talks about the 80-20 rules of life. Essentially is an 80-20 rule, but 10% of your life you live in the past, and that's for learning and for growth. 10% of your life you live in the future, and that's for goals. And 80% is focused on the present and just being in a pure state of gratitude. And when you're in that, you'll have a healthy balance, because you're never too far in the future. You're never stuck in the past. You're learning from the past, and you have goals for the future, but you can't get there if you're not having gratitude for where you are in the present moment today. And that's just keep bringing that mission to people. And it's become my overarching mission away from working necessarily with athletes and high performers. And it's really become the mission in the sense of, this is what I know. If I could bring and help humanity with anything, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, it's very much be here now, Ram Dass.
Hmm.
Just be here right
Absolutely.
now.
I've visited his house in Maui. It's basically like a place you can visit and just spend some time in, and just being able to walk around where he lived his last days,
Mhm.
and the property, just it was such a wonderful experience. So I went there with a group of friends, and yeah, it's a very epic experience.
How has your understanding changed over the time of what strength means to you?
Ooh, yeah. And speaking from the masculine lens, yeah, I mean, strength, and this is where we can get into, I hate the word toxic, and I try not to go down that path, but we'll just say like a pernicious style of masculinity is strength is definitely evolved. Like we're taught that strength is like brawn and physicality, and yes, that is part of it. But so much more of strength is in being, to me, and I actually, through talks with a friend of mine, I try to actually avoid using this word now too, which is vulnerability, which vulnerability is basically exposing yourself to harm, you know.
Mm,
And when you look at the breakdown and the etymology of the word, which it's like, well, that doesn't, I mean, that's like, okay, well, that seems actually not like a great thing to do, but true strength is actually becoming the version of you that you're supposed to be in your truest authentic expression. I think that whatever that is, because most athletes and most people that I've worked with, and that you see are even not just athletes but high performers of any right, anybody who keeps feeling like they have to keep doing and keep building, because that's building is essentially a strength. It's like, how strong can I build this thing, whether it's themselves physically or a business or whatever. They're doing it from the lens, most likely a lot of times without even unknowingly doing it, of trying to satisfy a person that is either, that they're distant from. Maybe it's a parent or someone, it could be their parent isn't even alive anymore, and they're still trying to live up to an expectation.
mm,
And they're constantly in this, again, fight or flight state, where their sympathetic nervous system's on fire, and they're not doing it from love. They're not doing it from, I'm like improving. They're doing it from, I'm proving. And
mm,
they're constantly in a sense of, I need to prove my worth. And don't get me wrong, a lot of great things have come from people, and a lot of amazing athletes have come from that lens. And when they walk away from their sport or whatever it is that they've done, a lot of people decline very fast because they have identified with this thing, and now this thing that they're constantly trying to prove their worth is gone. They have nothing to live for because they haven't actually worked on themselves. Because yes, they became this person that people hold in this high light, and yet they did so as like a shell of themselves, just to constantly parent please and to be the hero. And it's in that, true strength to me is releasing the ego, shedding, going into the shadow, and just seeing what are the parts of us that we haven't allowed ourselves to love because we thought those were weak, when really those things were just all a part of us anyway. And that's where our true strength is going to come from, is when we embrace all of that shadow side of us that we've ignored or we've suppressed because we thought it wasn't right, and just learning to have all of it as a part of us, and then which allows us to be our truest, fullest expression. And that to me is true strength, because from there you start working out from, like, I instead of saying I need to work out, you say I get to work out.
mm.
You start shifting. Everything shifts when you come into full like embodiment and authenticity and love for yourself. because it's all rooted in love at the end of the day. And that's when you're in your truest authenticity, that strength, and that strength is love.
I love that. When you said improving, I'm improving versus improving, that made me think of the difference in presence versus posturing, like playing dress up as a spiritual being. Um, but you know, you can see a guy in a truck driver in a ball cap who can be super spiritual and grounded. He doesn't look like he just, you know, came off of a retreat in Joshua Tree, but it, it's like, to me, some of that stuff is posturing, and not to make any judgment about it. I mean, I've totally been there too. I like my flowy garb, um, but it's
Right.
external. And then when you were talking earlier about getting out of the hero complex, I was thinking there's such a difference in being a hero and being a champion. Like championing each other is different, I
Mm,
think, than
yeah.
having to be someone's hero. Because everybody needs, I think, a champion. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. We all need a champion. Absolutely. And I'll get to that. Well, I'll start with that and I'll just go to the posturing thing in a second, or just tap into that for a second as well. But yeah, I believe because we all are champions, we just sometimes don't see it or we don't know it. And it helps to have people supporting us. It's like it's kind of the difference of one of the things that, and again, words cast spells. That's why they call it spelling, right? You know, that's like the whole energetic around what we say becomes a thing. So it's also in
Mhm.
how we speak. And one of the things that we always tell people all the time, and we think that we're quote unquote championing them, is that I'm so proud of you.
Mm,
And yet it's constantly telling them they need that validation. Whereas you should tell them, you should be so proud of yourself. Instead of saying, I'm so proud of you, you should tell them, you should be so proud of yourself. Because what you're doing is subconsciously is telling them that they have it in them to be proud. They don't need my validation. And once they can actually, and it's good to always, like I said, have the championing person, but we need to constantly keep empowering them to realize others. And that's true support, and true championing is telling them like, you have it in you, and empowering them to know, you're right, I should be proud of myself. Like, because we never take time to celebrate the small wins. We're so focused on the goal, we don't enjoy the journey. So
uh,
we need to really, and when we get to that goal, then we're like, what's the next goal? And that's going back to the same thing of like the person who's trying to please a parent, and I'm proving to that person is the goal is never enough. We forget
mhm.
to enjoy the journey, and we get to the end of the goal and we're like, this is it. Well, I'm not satisfied. What's the next thing? And I think that's the other thing too, is, you know, and the championing is great, and the hero part of it too. Like, yeah, it's, you got to shift from being the hero, because if you look at all of it, you can just take it into the comic book spectrum. If you look at the difference between like a hero and a villain, there's really not much difference between the two, as far as how they've all been through some sort of traumatic experience as a child, um, in a growing up situation. And it doesn't take much to turn the hero into a villain or the villain into a hero. It just depends on, one wants to help people not feel the pain that they felt. The other one wants to make people feel the pain that they felt.
Would you
And
say resentment is the number one element of a villain?
yeah, yeah, it's they've never been able to turn, they've taken their pain and want to inflict more pain, where the hero is taking their pain and trying to turn it into purpose. The problem is the hero is still very much a recluse. They don't know how to associate really well with, and without being the hero, they don't even know who they are.
Mm,
Um, Instead of being like that support structure, and that's where I see, you know, the essences from like of religion or just spiritual beings that are, uh, you know, of at a higher magnitude, or have kind of figured it out. Whether you, I think, I believe Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, all those people, and some of our modern day people today, like Mother Teresa, Jane Goodall, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, people like that, I believe they operated from that sense of, I'm going to continue to champion you. I'm not here to be your hero, but I'm going to inspire and empower you
Mhm.
to do that. And and that's the other thing, and trying going down a rabbit hole too. That's another thing too. It's the speaking thing that I do, and where I'm taking this whole power of presence piece is, I don't, people will call me what they want to call me, but I don't really want to be seen as a motivational speaker. I don't believe I can motivate anyone. I believe all I can do is inspire people based off of my own actions. And inspire is also, in essence, the same context of inspire is also a fact of breathing. It's helping to breathe life into people when you inspire. And that's kind of where I want to also take it, is to help people be inspired. And that's really what that's also where a hero isn't motivating, because if you don't motivate, then the hero starts to feel down about themselves. But if you plant that seed and you breathe life into them, and then they take that and they move forward with it, then that's the whole context of life. And you're not forcing them to do it, you're not pulling them, you're just allowing them to do it for themselves.
Yeah, because it can be disempowering to be someone's hero.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where, in the spiritual community, getting to the, when you're saying the posturing stuff as well, I mean, that's part of the, I believe most coaches and most people that are in this space, um, they got into it for, I like to believe they got into it for the right reason. However, again, it's just in the context of things, of when you start supporting people and people start going to you for support, you have to learn to keep doing your own grounding practices. And you start seeing a lot of charlatans that are speaking things that are not, but they're not living their life in that same accord.
Well, I appreciate so much that you've made time. This is the inaugural, the very first podcast of Deep to Deep. I wanted
So we
to
can keep
ask you.
going for a little bit if you want. I mean,
Okay,
it's totally up to you. Yeah, I've
okay,
got a little
great.
bit more time, so yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, and by the way, you actually gave me an exception to, I do have a rule about like not saying you should to anybody, except for now, I do like the exception of you should be proud of yourself.
Yeah, you shoulds are never really a welcome word, but yeah, in that context, it does it definitely shifts into an empowering state.
What gives you cautious hope about the state of our world moving forward?
Ooh, that's a good question. I preface, I'm not a huge fan of the word hope personally.
Mhm.
Um, I I believe in faith in humanity, faith in myself, faith in the process, yeah, and faith in God, and just the essence of all things being one. But I believe we're hitting a threshold, and my cautious, I wouldn't say cautious, I just believe faith is that it's all happening for us. I know it is, and that's not just to be dismissive, but all of this has transpired, and we're hitting a threshold of awakening, and more people are awakening to the world. The thing is we have to shift from awakening to being fully cognizantly aware. Big difference between someone who's awake, which is where we get this whole construct of being woke, which is like if you get stuck in that, is then you start getting kind of angry, because there's this interesting, it's kind of, everything's got the bell curve of life, and that's where we're at right now, is people are waking up, and there's so much just chaos and distractions and turmoil in the world. And it seems like every day, like
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier about this woman getting killed, and so much is happening. And the thing is we have to, and yet when we wake up to kind of all of the pain, and that even people who voted for Trump, a lot of people are starting to see, oh, he's really not living up to what he said he was going to do. People that voted for Biden or Kamala, they are like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the right choice. We're starting to see that it's all kind of an illusion, and that at the end of the day, it's so much of what's happening above us. When I say above, more of like the powers that be. And I truly believe our government is typically divided into two sides, and there's a master puppet above them governing all of it, and or a couple of puppets even above that, like the puppeteer, and we're on the bottom rung, kind of like we're the bottom row of the puppets just doing the thing. And once we start to awaken outside of that, we have to ground into being aware and self-aware, because when we're awake, we're still very vulnerable, and we're still very reactionary. When we're aware, we respond. And when we're aware, we stop and we allow ourselves to breathe and just say, okay, what is this showing me? I don't need, my old self would have responded this way or reacted this way, but now I can actually breathe it in, take a tactical pause, and allow myself to respond in a powerful way, in an empowering way, where not only I raise my vibration, but I inadvertently raise the vibration of others. And I believe that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Mm.
But in that, and I don't know if it's when that's going to happen, but I do believe that we're going to start seeing a shift of humanity and a collective, not everyone, of course, because you'll never have everything as an absolute, but we'll start seeing a collective of people coming together back into communities, connecting, living in a state of living off the land. Yeah, we're still going to have AI, we're still going to have all this stuff, but we're going to start seeing connection to where we start getting away from all the distraction. I feel social media is hitting its threshold, and people are still having that hard time. They're awake to the fact that it's screwing with their life,
Mm.
but they're not aware enough to step away from it. I'm just as guilty in a lot of ways. I'm still posting on social all the time. But we're going to eventually get away from the distractions. So I have that faith that the awake and the awakened aspect of where we are, I have faith that it's just part of the process, and eventually more and more of us will start becoming more aware. And in that, we'll stop being reactionary and being more responsive from a healthy, grounded space.
Mm. Do you still ever walk through, I mean, do you ever walk through sort of dark times or times that feel like depressive?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the human experience. I don't, pain is inevitable. And in the moments of the initial pain, there is a little bit of suffering. I don't think suffering is ever negotiable. It just depends on how long you choose. So, in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he speaks to, I won't go in the whole detail of the
It's a
book,
great
but
book.
a great book. But, the core concept of it is that humans find meaning in three different places. And it's usually the third that derails everybody. So we find meaning in achievement. So whether it be getting married, having a kid, getting a job promotion, hitting a goal, a workout, whatever it is, any kind of achievement, we find meaning in that. We find meaning in love, which could be love from a partner, could be love from their child, their dog, neighbor, coworkers, just connecting and camaraderie. But then the last is suffering, and we have to find meaning in suffering, because suffering is what derails everybody. It's why he saw people not make it through the concentration camps, and he did, because they lost all sense of meaning in the suffering that they were going through. And when you find meaning in suffering, you can transmute that suffering. So, and I think that that's all part of the evolutionary aspects of life. I feel that every bit of pain that we go through is already like been pre-written. I believe that my journey was meant for me and only me, and it's been handed down from generations. It might be just my soul's contract, and my responsibility is to take that pain, not that it's all pain, obviously, but to take that and turn that pain into purpose, turn that pain into pleasure, and to turn that pain into something that no longer serves with this soul, and then I can actually start to turn it into prosperity and to turn it into other, can name any other P that I like to have things that
Power,
rhyme and
purpose,
like
prosperity,
power,
promise.
yeah, power, exactly. Turn the pain into power. So that's it just helps me remember things, but it's but yeah, that's kind of what it is. We have to shift that. We have to shift that, and that's the whole purpose of life. When people say, "What's your purpose?" It's like our purpose is ever evolving, but it's to transmute whatever pain that we receive, because it's all meant for us.
Mhm.
We're supposed to learn that lesson, and trans so that whenever we pass, I believe, it's again my belief is that our physical form dies, but the soul lives on, and it's to help our soul reach a specific essence of enlightenment to on whoever gains our soul in the next form. Wherever our soul goes to, and that's, I believe that's a lot of the construct of it all, but that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to not stay in suffering, and to move through it quickly, because the lesson, if we don't learn, if we just overpower it, because a lot of people say, "Oh, just push through it." It's like, well, if you do that, it's going to show up in uglier form down the line. So
Yeah, it's a
you might as well
bypass.
sit with it. Yeah, you sit with it, embody it, see for what it is, not more than it is, and just process it and allow yourself to release it.
Mhm.
Something that has just kind of come more into my awareness is a similar type of process of a lot of times in a visualization, it's basically like we're visualizing and addressing the thing, right? That is just this floating thing that's come into our central line of focus. And but when people always talk about visualize specific things, like I would always tell people when I was a sales leader, like visualize the sale, visualize the success, visually, like the step-by-step process. Who's the person? Where are you at? Like, what does it look like? Everything go. But this new thing that kind of came into my awareness is actually visualize the worst case scenario. And it's something that apparently like the Spartans and gladiators, or from what I'm being told, used to do, is they would visualize the worst case scenario, feel all of that pain, all of like what that feels like. And then they would just, after they felt all of it and sat with it, they would say, who am I without this fear? And or
Mm.
something along those lines. And who am like, now that I've felt that, who am I without that, so that I know that I don't ever have to feel that again, because they've already felt it. They don't have to go through that. And they're like sitting with that pain, that suffering, and they just visualize, and they're like, is this all there is? Is that what it is? Is that what I'm afraid of? And then they go out, and it's almost like a cheat code to conquering. You go out with full essence of confidence, because you're like, yeah, I already faced it. I don't need to face it again, or I'm not going to face it again. I already know what that looks like. So they go out with no sense of worry, no sense of hesitancy, and you just conquer it from that perspective. And I think it's such a beautiful reframe of addressing the fear, the suffering, the pain, and just seeing it already before it could even happen. And then now you don't have any fear at all. You're just going out with full confidence that you're going to actually perform.
Good stuff. You know, I've got some public speaking coming up this year, and I do sometimes get a little stage fright about it. So maybe I'll sit with that and try that meditation. Before we close out, Jeff, is there any last thing that you want to leave folks with today?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the biggest thing for people, for me, is to, if I could leave with any kind of message, just lean into what we talked about earlier. Just lean into your truest, authentic expression. Lean into those areas of discomfort. Um, See what it's showing you. Don't just keep reacting to it. Learn how to respond to it. Um, Understand that everything in this life is just a process and a construct of what we've done up to this point, and we're exactly where we are and where we're supposed to be at this given time. And we have the power at any given point to change the trajectory. We're under no obligation to be the same person that we were, and we're under no obligation to be in the same position that we are. And we can start to take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and just open one door at a time, and just keep going. And when your body says rest, allow yourself to rest. And when your body says go, allow yourself to go. It's if you're sitting there floating in the ocean, and there's a lot of waves. There's no sense in trying to swim against the waves. Tread water, and then when the water's calm, keep going. And I think that it's just a matter of giving ourselves that grace, understanding that we are the divine and we have that in us. And in that, if you haven't figured out what your purpose is, or at least your purpose in this present moment, just keep trying things. And there's no timetable. Some people seem to figure it out earlier, but none of us really have it figured out. And the purpose is ever evolving. And the biggest thing is just to lead with love and to continue to serve others in the highest version of ourselves. So,
Thank you. Truly.
thank-
If this conversation has resonated with you as a listener, I want to invite you to spend some more time with Jeff on his show, The Power of Presence. What are the platforms where we can hear that, Jeff?
Apple and Spotify.
It just reminds us what it feels like to slow down and actually be here, be present. And I think that's the whole point. So, anyone listening, thank you for showing up in this moment. These conversations matter and they help steady us. I hope you'll come back and we'll continue going deep together.